massive open online course on Indian Economy 1. Here today we will discuss the population and economic development. Now after completing this module, you will be able to understand the complex relationship between population and economic development, and also you will be able to assess the India's status, problems and opportunities in this regard. Now the plan of our today's discussion is like this, that firstly in the introductory part we will discuss the positive relationship between the population and economic growth, and then in the next section we will try to find out some of the retarding effects of high population. Then we will also discuss the relationship between a country's population growth and with its international economic position. And then after very briefly discussing the theory of demographic transition, we will discuss the India's demographic transition and its demographic dividend. Then with a discussion on urbanization, we shall conclude. So now we can say that a country is made up of human population, and by economic development we mean the well-being of the whole population of an economy. Now, well-being can be increased only with the increase of the availability of goods and services, and we need more labor to produce more goods and services. So, in a way, we can straightforward link the population growth with the economic growth in a very positive way. And through economic growth, we will achieve economic development. Also, indirectly, population supports the economic growth via the increase in effective demand. Rostro's theory of economic growth is also based on this condition. And also, following the experience of the Western Europe, Kuznets, Lewis and Mayer et al., the economists like this, proposed population growth as a factor behind increase in the not only the aggregate output but also the per capita output of the European community at that period. Population growth can also lead to the growth of physical capital through the higher level of human capital formation. With education, knowledge and technical know-how, the efficiency of human labor increases, which indirectly increases the productivity of physical capital. Again, economists like Knox and Lewis postulated that the high population growth can lead to higher level of capital formulation through the withdrawal of surplus labor from the rural to urban or from agricultural to industrial sector. And again, with a high population, if we have a low wage, then this can be also a source of higher profit, and definitely it will lead to higher capital formulation. So now we can come to some of the retarding effects of high population, because excessive population may hinder the increase in consumption and production. Firstly, it reduces the land-man ratio, and in this regard, the Malthusian theory of population postulated that the human population grows exponentially while food production grows only arithmetically. So a balance can be made in between these two only through a positive and preventive checks on the population. And by positive checks on population, Malthus meant war, disease or famines that would lead to decline of the population. But in today's world, with technological growth, we have probably solved the problem of these kinds of imbalance between the population and food production. At present, the problem of food scarcity is more related with the distributional issue, not the production issue. But here we must keep in mind that in increasing the average yield of the food grains, the critical point is to judicious use of the chemical fertilizer and water, because these are the main ingredients in increasing the food production. And the excessive use of chemical fertilizer will not only affect our health but also pollute the health of the soil and water. Again, excessive use of groundwater also creates an imbalance in regional water availability and also makes it unsuitable for human consumption. So, population growth also significantly impacts the common property resources through higher cultivation of the livestock to meet the increasing demand. Again, along with this, we must not forget the threats to the environmental sustainability due to the interminable urbanization due to higher population growth. And we must also keep in mind that with technological progress, we increases our productivity, and also we are using capital intensive techniques in every sphere of our life. So day by day, a lesser number of workers are needed. But with high population, family as a unit need to share more and more of the output between the earners and non-earner member. So the per capita availability generally for the foods and services are getting reduced. And this is also true if we think at the national level. And this particular feature we can also apply in case of social or public infrastructure or the services like sewage facilities, public transportation system, police system, in whatever way we can think. And with limited government resources are limited due to high population and low per capita definitely. So with limited resources, it has been a challenging task to increase the services of these facilities at the same rate as the population is growing. So in terms of per capita availability, these services are deteriorating. And this can also be true in case of health and educational services, which are the basic ingredients in human capital formation. So, excessive population growth may hinder the human capital formation. And likewise, with the increase in population growth, it becomes increasingly difficult to solve the problem of unemployment and the associated socio-economic effects. Population also is the primary basis of any political units of a country, and with its growth we basically need to more decentralization. That is, we may need more number of districts within a state or even more number of states within a country. And we can only hope for a peaceful solution, but we cannot deny the possibility of social unrest with the increasing demand of the decentralization, which increases with the population growth. High population also negatively affects the physical capital formation through higher consumption demand. It draws down the wage rate at every skill level, and naturally we end up with the low rate of savings. But to increase the per capita income, we need to grow economically more and than the rate of the population. And given capital output ratio, we need to invest more. That is, we need to have more savings than our consumption need. But with high population, it is more or less a very difficult or challenging task to have higher savings. In today's world, if we look at the developing countries' population share, we can see that developing countries' share has increased from 66% in 1950 to 83% now and should reach 86% by 2050. However, it shares only 50% of the world GDP in terms of purchasing power parity. And pressure on environment, particularly uneven distribution of human inhabitants and the rapid urbanization is also a cause of concern. Environmental degradation due to man-made pollution, deforestation is also directly related with the population growth, and it raises the question on the sustainable development objectives. However, we must keep also in our mind that the countries with highest per capita material consumption and also emission of greenhouse gases are not the highly populous countries. Basically, these things are happened in the high per capita income, that is the developed countries. Also, population growth may not be related with the low human and physical capital formation. China or other East Asian country can exemplify this. All these countries experienced a decline in their population growth only after their rapid economic growth or development, not the other way around. Furthermore, China, even as of now, possesses the significant share of world GDP like the USA, around 16% of world GDP, but at the same time it shares the largest proportion of world population, around 18% of world population. So the relationship between population growth and economic development is not very straightforward. But as of now, we can say that population growth is not the only cause of underdevelopment, definitely. We can also relate the population growth of a country with its international position. Firstly, with high population growth in developing countries, the divergence between the advanced world and the developing world increases because the per capita income of the developing world decreases with the population growth. However, how high population growth encourages migration, and through migration we can have more remittances, which is a good thing for a highly populous country, because remittances not only improve our balance of payment position, it also improves the standard of living of the recipient country and adds positively to the local economy also, where we can say Kerala is a good example of these kinds of positive effects of migration. However, here also we must note that the advanced world do not prefer migration, at least for the low skill level. With migration of high skilled labor or professionals, brain drain increases and it leads to serious social and economic losses. The high population also leads to increase in import demand, and also we can consume a certain proportion of our exportables, and thereby we can deteriorate the balance of payment situation, particularly the current account balance. Now, if we look at the theory of demographic transition, which actually relates the population growth and the economic development of a typical economy, we can see that this theory actually predicts 3 stages of population and human development. According to this theory, in the primitive society, population growth remains stagnant as high birth rate more or less gets offset with the high death rate. But with economic development, firstly, our mortality rate declines, and so we start to have a higher population as birth rates decline, but at a later stage of development. So every country during its initial phase of economic development experiences a huge increase in population due to low mortality combined with a high birth rate. Then during the latter stages of development, this population started to decline due to the commensurate decrease in the birth rate also. Now if we look at the India's current position through its demographic transition, we can see that at the time of its independence in 1947, India's population was about 345 million and life expectancy was about 33 years only, and total fertility rate was close to 6 births per woman. Immediately after independence, government took measures to improve the health status of the population, and also as a result, death rate started to fall significantly everywhere in India, and life expectancy also improved to 50 years. Crude birth rate fell from 37.2 to 16 in between 1951 to 1981. However, as the theory of demographic transition suggests, TFR during this period declined only to 5.4 child per woman from 5.86 in 1951. As a result, the annual average growth of population increased from 0.83% to 2.20% from 1951 to 1981. And by the late 70s, the population growth was so formidable that it was believed that actually it is making the process of economic development slower. The problem of various economic and social issues like poverty, slow urbanization, absence of social security, child marriage, low average years of marriage, social and religious stigma or superstitions, etc., are the reasons behind the high birth rate during that time. However, with economic growth, the TFR has fallen to 3 women in 2001 to 2 per woman in 2020, which is even below the 2.1 replacement rate. So, as a consequence of this, population growth has also reduced, and for example, in 2010, it was 1.38%. The pattern of demographic transition suggests India's situation is definitely improving with its economic status. Shortly, we can move to the third stage of demographic transition, and we can expect by the middle of this century, we will reach the phase of population stabilization. However, these do not imply the present concern about the high population growth or the population pressure on the existing social or environmental infrastructure or the density of the population. Problems of the density of population is being decaying. Technically, India entered into the second stage of demographic transition from as early as 1921. So, its delayed transition into the third stage lead to this kind of population explosion. But one thing in the demographic transition of India is very encouraging, and that is the demographic dividend. By demographic dividend, we mean a large number of young population in between 15 to 64 years of age, which is also the working age population, and a declining dependency ratio. Dependency ratio is the ratio between child and old age people to the working population. And now India is passing through such a phase of demographic transition where its working age population is growing faster than the total population, and thus the dependency ratio is declining. It is expected that its percentage of working age population will increase to 68.4% in 2026 from the 62.9% in 2006. If this amount of population can be transferred to human capital and a commensurate increase in the physical and infrastructural development could be done, then we must have a manifold increase in our total production. And again, due to low dependency ratio, we can experience a higher rate of savings and thus higher capital formation. So, we will not only experience a higher increase in the economic growth today, we can also secure the future growth by increasing the total capital stock. But the precondition of having these kinds of benefit lies in the employment opportunity we have or we can create. However, our experience with employment generation is not very cheering or encouraging if we particularly look at the data from 1990s. The phenomenon of jobless growth in this regard is a cause of concern. If not properly used, the social unrest is a must-have with this increased unemployed pool of youth. Unemployment is also has its direct economic implications in terms of creating its own vicious circle, because higher unemployment will lead to lower savings, lower capital formation, and again we will have higher unemployment. And also the process of development can even get slower with these kinds of socio-economic hindrance if not managed properly. To reap the benefit of demographic dividend, quantity and quality of school education must be increased along with health of the population. We need to focus on the employability of the youth population. Labor force participation is also another issue, particularly for the women, and in this regard, increasing the wage rate is another challenge due to the huge working age population. Now coming to the issue of urbanization. It is an important issue here because urbanization is a more or less synonymous to economic development, and with this kind of economic development, that is urbanization, we have a both way relationship with the population growth. Population growth actually positively affects the urbanization, and also urbanization positively affects the population stabilization, not the population growth. Why we think that urbanization is synonymous to economic development? This is because along with the increase in non-agricultural activity, in every modern facility, that is be it technological like the modern means of transportation, be it social like education, or be it infrastructural service like the health infrastructure, all are available in the urban areas, and by economic development we mean increasing of these kinds of facilities. Now we are coming to the two-way relationship between population growth and these kinds of economic development, that is urbanization. Urbanization with all its facilities, particularly the educational facilities with increasing return to scale, positively affects both the decline of birth rates and also the decline of mortality rates. Urbanization helped in reducing the birth rate due to the very nature of its economic activity. Due to the greater penetration of the market economy, the urban areas demands households to be economically more engaged, And also with limited scope of having an extended family, urbanization actually raises the bringing of cost of a child, which is relative to the rural areas. And also it has a dynamism not only in the sphere of economic activity but also in terms of socio-cultural activities stemming from the greater availability of educational services. So, it is definitely one step ahead towards population stabilization relative to the rural economy. However, India's experience of urbanization is not very cheerful. Till now, most of the India's people live in the rural areas. This is one of the reasons behind India's delayed entry into the third phase of demographic transition due to higher birth rate in the rural areas we have relative to the urban areas. Now, the process of urbanization is also itself slow in India because of the demographic features. Until the mortality rate declined, the urbanization couldn't get its momentum because with the infectious disease which directly related with the density of the population affected urban population negatively. And so, with economic development or through the demographic or in the process of demographic transition, when mortality rates decline, the pace and scope of urbanization increases. Now, the process of urbanization itself was slow in India or other tropical developing countries because of the demographic feature of high mortality rate due to infectious disease. The contagious effects of these disease varies directly with the population density, which is a definite feature of urbanization. With the improvement in the mortality rates or the massive vaccination programs, the urban population started to increase. So, in the process of demographic transition, the mortality rates declined and the pace and scope of urbanization increased. But we should keep in mind that along with this, the demographic along with this demographic reason of slow urbanization in the past, at present also in India, the important reason behind the sluggish urbanization is the slow development of the non-agricultural sector, particularly the industrial sector. These sectors failed to grow at the satisfactory rate and as a result didn't encourage the rural-urban migration. Most of the increase in the urban population is the natural increase of the urban population, not the rural-urban migration. Even though the per capita income of the urban areas are higher than the rural areas, but with its limited capacity to generate economic prosperity to all, it failed to solve the problem of unemployment and poverty in the urban areas. So, as of now, urbanization in India cannot be considered as a means of achieving both economic development and population stabilization. But definitely, urbanization has that potentiality and so we should look at the matter more seriously. So now coming to the conclusion, we can say that population growth, particularly when demographic dividend is there, can facilitate economic growth and development. However, appropriate policies of transforming the population into human capital and a commensurate increase in the physical capital is a precondition. We should keep in mind that in this age of technical advancement, excessive population in most of the time is a disadvantage. So, appropriate policies must take to keep the population under check. What is encouraging is that all the population control measures are pro-developmental. So, population control hardly create any burden to the economy. And for particular relationship of the population growth and development of India, we can say that the size of the population of India is definitely a cause of concern. Demographic projections suggest that India overtake China by the middle of the century. Though some are hopeful about this prospect due to one, the demographic dividend India has, and also due to the importance it can gain through its larger size of the population in the Committee of Nations, we can say that pressure it is already adding to the burdened environmental resources and social infrastructure is of no less worry. India has definitely done a commendable job regarding the demographic transition or the features. Its success not only includes the increase in life expectancy, decline of birth and mortality rate, but also in terms of women and child's health, education, socio-economic status and family welfare. However, given the size of the economy, these achievements are not enough to have a sound level of socio-economic development. Also, in India, the interstate, rural-urban, gender and caste-wise variations in the feature of demography are causes of concern, and we must address these problems to have a comprehensive development. So, our lecture ends here. Thank you.